Welcome everybody to Motherhood, raw, full but true, with me, your host, Rainbow Goddess. This podcast offers candid portrayals of the reality of mothering in a Western, individualistic, patriarchal culture. Dear listeners, just before we get into the magic of this episode, I want to make a couple of announcements. So the first is to let you know that I'm running a Mending Mattress Sense day retreat on Sunday the 25th of August. This is a sacred space for mothers to come at any stage of their mattress sense journey that want to be held in a circle that's specific to tending to the challenges and the shadow and the pain and the grief that need healing during mattress sense. We're going to work through deep restorative yoga sound bath to centre and presence, working with a cacao and rose elixir to open and tend to the heart. We're going to move into an ancestral mother's blessing journey, and then from there a deep sharing circle with the other mothers around, just to pour out, unburden, let go of the stories. And then we're going to move into a ritual with the Mother's Mending Pot. This is a totem, a magical totem that I've created specifically for these retreat days from clay that I foraged from my mother river, from the river behind my mother's house, and from the land that held me while I became a mother. This will be deep, sympathetic magic and offer you a real opportunity to connect with that, the womb of the great Mother Cosmos, where you can pour in all that's no longer needed, all that you've finished with in your mattress sense journey. And it's also a time where you can make deep prayers for yourself, for the trajectory of motherhood, for the collective of motherhood, and also for your children and their lives. And then we're going to finish with the closing of the bones, which is rooted in the South American practice where they use the rebozo, and we're appreciating the depth of the medicine that comes from being held, having our wombs, hips, bellies massaged and anointed, and being wrapped and sung to and rocked. And this supports a deep integration of the journey of the day and brings it to a very beautiful conclusion. So if you'd like information about that, get in touch, leave me a message. And the second announcement I've got is I've set up a donation page. So a couple of people now have got in touch and asked if they could contribute. And that's really beautiful because I do not get paid, obviously, for making this podcast, but I do pay for certain pieces of software to be able to edit it. So it's really supportive if people do want to do that. So if you feel the call to lend some financial energy exchange to this project, just know that it will be deeply appreciated. I welcome it with deep, deep gratitude, humble thanks and respect. So bless you. Thank you so much for listening. Without further ado, over to Jane. So welcome everybody to episode 8 of Motherhood Raw Full but True with me, your host Rainbow. A really special episode for you today over the theme of motherhood and menopause. And I'm interviewing a very special woman, Jane, who is a healer, a wise woman, a creative woman who facilitates red tents. She's also a moon mother and a Reiki master. So Jane is going to tell us her story of motherhood, of mattress sense, underneath this framework of motherhood in menopause, but also through her wisdom of feminine spirituality. She's going to take us on a journey through the archetypes of the feminine as well. And she's hoping that this podcast, this meandering, beautiful story full of her own ups and downs, her own journey, but also this feminine spirituality, will leave listeners with some ideas and inspiration on how we can find time for ourselves, find time for our path amongst the chaos of burnout and overwhelm during mattress sense with all of these feminine cycles in our bodies. So it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here, Jane. So I need to tell the listeners how I met you.
Mhm.
So I went to a festival called Conscious Camp, just about to move into my van, I think. Really in my maiden era, was painting my face and really expressing myself. And I came to your Red Tent workshop, and it was a monarch ceremony. And you invited us all into a container, a really safe container. First, there was a meditation journey to meet these women in this glen in my psyche, and they were my ancestors, these feminine archetypes. It was so beautiful. And they held up this mirror and helped me to see myself in it, which was just incredible. The love that I felt from those women. And then you led us all outside in the glorious sunshine to this sacred field where we could all get naked if we wanted. And as we lay there in the sun listening to you, you spoke about Monarch being this rite of passage, which is denied to so many of us Western patriarchalized women who haven't been brought up with this spirituality, or not even a spirituality, but the way of women, the way of a woman's body, its cyclical nature, its deep embeddedness into the moon cycle and the earth cycles. And he said, no matter what age you are, no matter even if you've finished menopause and you don't even have your bleed, we're doing this in honor of those girls who got their first bleed and weren't held, didn't get given the wisdom, the transmission of what they were, what power there was in the bodies. And you led us through this beautiful ceremony. And it was so profound for me to have that deep awareness of menstrual consciousness. And it really set me on a deep path with my feminine cycle and my femininity. And after that, I went and marked it with a tattoo that I designed. And I have this tattoo now over my womb. And it's a red crescent moon with like a representative of the five elements. And then I've added to it since as well with the symbol, the alchemical symbol for Earth, with a circle in it, which symbolizes the womb portal. So I've got this monarch, and then I've also got this like womb symbology, and it's like this, it's almost like a protective talisman over my womb, because I understood after that ceremony, what you led us through, I understood not just the power of what I held in my body, but the preciousness and the sacredness of it. And that meant that I could deepen into the preciousness and the sacredness of myself. So it's such an honor and a privilege to have you on, Jane. I can't wait to go on this journey and hear more and be inspired about my cronehood when that's coming. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful moment that we're in. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Beau. And it's lovely to hear the transformation of women after that, because I know it's powerful and I see it. I see how women, it does something to them. It changes the psyche in them, because they've been honored for this, for being a woman. So it's lovely to hear it then, because it's very special to me to do monarch ceremonies. I've done it for so many women, and I just love it. I think everyone should have it. Every woman should have it. And I have done some girls who have started their monarch, and that's special too. That's so special. And I just wish everyone could have a red tent and be honoured for all these rites of passages, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. I mean, before we get into, because you became a mother in your maidenhood, didn't you? But before
Yeah.
we get into that, maybe you could just speak a little bit about what Red Tent is, the philosophy behind it, and maybe if you just lay out the cycles of the feminine and what they all are, and then when you meander later through your journey, the listeners who don't know and who aren't aware of that have got a deeper understanding.
Yeah. So red tent is kind of just it's the same as women's circles, sisterhood circles, whatever you call it. It's just about women coming together, gathering once a month. Red tents are always under the new moon when our energy is depleted, and we're just so that's why we come together to hold each other through this depletion of energy. So it's a place to release, to bring the energy back to us, because we always come out of red tent full of energy, even if we're crawling in so tired. There's just something of women sitting together that just energizes you, this energy that's just so powerful. And in red tent I always send it out to women that can't find a red tent, um or a circle to sit in. So Red Tent as well, the heart of Red Tent for me is the sharing circle. It's given a safe place for women to speak, to be heard, you know, whatever they're going through. And we always use oracle cards, and the oracle cards always fit in with what women want to speak. It's amazing. But also in Red Tent, I teach a lot about connecting to the womb and the archetypes of the womb. And this connects to your cycle. And I always say it doesn't matter if you are bleeding, don't have a cycle. You can use the moon because they coincide. So let's start at where are we? So after the new moon, we have the first quarter. And this is pre-ovulation. And this is what I call the maiden. So there's an energy there of new beginnings, got the energy to do things. This is a time where, you know, try new things. You'll probably stick to them if you try them in the maiden. Start your healthy eating, then you'll stick to it. Try a new activity, you'll probably stick to it. Get your paperwork in order. It's also about joy and for yourself, the maiden. So do things that you enjoy. And then we go on to the full moon, which is ovulation. And this is the mother energy. And the mother energy is, again, very outward energy. It's from the heart. So it's very community. You're very easy to communicate with people, listen to people when you're in the mother energy. So if you've got them important conversations with bosses, with family, with anyone, do it in the mother energy because your heart's that open. You can listen to other people. It's also about giving yourself a service. And a lot of us get stuck in this mother energy because it feels so good to be of service. But then we forget, we make all these commitments and we forget that the next phase is our premenstruation, which is the last quarter of the moon, and our energy starts to come in. And this is where, you know, PMS comes, and PMS is kind of like we're not giving ourselves that rest and that inward journey. So we're getting angry, our needs are not being met. So this comes out as that anger, that frustration. That can also be harnessed with creativity. I always say create rather than destroy, because we can do that in this energy. In the phase of life, this would be like the witches, the women that were put away for hysteria, the wild woman. She's quite scary to the patriarch, this archetype. And then that takes us to the new moon, and that's your when you bleed. Can't think of the word. This is menopause. And this is about going within, and this is the stillness, and this is taking time for you and to listen to that inner voice. And when we listen to that inner voice, we get all the answers we want. We get all the what we should do, what's wrong with us, what do we let go of, where do we go? If we just give ourselves that moment of stillness. And this is why for Red Tent as well, you know, if you read all about Red Tents, the old moon lodges, they'd go in for 3 months, you know, sorry, 3 months, my wish, go in for 3 days. And they'd bleed together and they'd share, you know, how to be a mother, how to be a good partner, recipes, healing. And I always say, we can't do 3 days anymore, but we can do 3 hours in Red Tent. And that's what I provide, 3 hours once a month to refill our cups, refill our wombs, basically.
Beautiful. It's such a beautiful teaching, and it's such a beautiful map. Like, I interviewed some mums during my second year of my transpersonal psychology masters, actually, and the research we did was about the postnatal bleed. So when a woman had had a child, when she got that first bleed back again after birthing a child, and there was such, rich wisdom in there about this bleeding phase. And one of my participants, she actually said when she got it back, it was like she had a compass back. It was like coming home.
Yeah.
And there was one woman, interestingly, with her first child, didn't have an awareness of menstrual consciousness, or let's call it a feminine path, an embodied feminine spirituality. She didn't have awareness with it with her first, but by the time she'd had a third child, she'd been part of a women's group for a while, and she wanted to celebrate this bleed, so she made what she called a bloodberry pie. And by
Right.
this time, her first child was old enough to communicate, and I think she was about 7 by this time, her first child. And she mentioned how her third child would say to her father, "Mummy needs a hot water bottle and a cup of tea now because she's
Love it.
bleeding." So by this point, she'd actually initiated a daughter into menstrual consciousness. And there was also some interesting literature that they did in 2014 with some men and their state of menstrual consciousness and how it impacted their health in the relationships. And men who hadn't had an initiation into menstrual consciousness by a conscious female
Mhm.
was still quite immature and quite sexist. One of them even said, "Oh, when my girlfriend's menstruating, it's blowjob week." And it had no
Wow.
idea that she needed to rest. And then men who were quite menstrually conscious because they'd been held by these women who knew about it themselves, they even had apps on their own phones which tracked the partner's cycle. So they knew that when she was in that PMS phase, that premenstrual phase, if she was being argumentative, it wasn't his fault. He didn't need to take it personally and he didn't need to argue back. He just needed to honour the fact that she needed to rest so he could run her a bath, offer her a massage, and really work with her in partnership, honouring what's going on in her body because this doesn't happen in men's bodies, it doesn't
Yeah.
happen in children's bodies, and it happens so that we can carry on making human
Yeah.
beings. So once they'd got to this level of awareness, this menstrual consciousness in men, then they had much more fulfilling and successful relationships, happier relationships, happier
Absolutely.
wives, happier girlfriends, happier lovers,
Yeah.
even happier mothers.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing to get this download and to share this map with the listeners who perhaps aren't aware of
Yeah.
this. And then the other thing I wanted to say was how these archetypes of the cycle really map onto the archetypes of a woman's life. So we start
Absolutely.
off in maidenhood with this joy, bit of naivete, loads of adventurous spirit, skipping through the fields, everything's okay. And then we hit motherhood, where it's about self-sacrifice and giving and service. And then we come into menopause where our womb starts to slow down, our bleed starts to retreat, and we're in that like almost premenstrual phase. You call it the enchantress, and then moving into crone when our bleeds stop and we haven't got that constant cycling through all these different hormones, really impacting our behavior and our cycle. Like, I am really looking forward to the day when I feel myself
Yeah.
without all these hormones. Like, I think I'll feel like a completely different woman.
Yeah.
And even might just take myself off for a year to be on the land with my tent, while it all happens and come back this like glorious, calm, peaceful
Yeah.
crone who's like not neurotic anymore. Wouldn't that be beautiful? But yeah, if there's anything else you want to say on the archetypes of the women's life.
So the only thing is, like if you hadn't honoured your maiden or your mother and you were in your enchantress phase now, which is usually around 40s, I say like maiden's 20s, mother's 30s, enchantress is 40s and crone's 50s. That's not, a set path, but that's roughly in between there. You'll be, roughly. So like if you're in your enchantress and you'd never honored your maiden and you'd never honored your mother, because you've still got a cycle and you meet these every month, you can work with them still and you can still honor them. And that's what's lovely. And that's why I do the monarch ceremony, no matter what age or where you are, you have to honor them. And I think it's Miranda Gray, who I taught under to be a moon mother, that she says that when you come through menopause, you're a complete woman because you've cycled with all these archetypes. But you've got a lot of women that haven't, but it will come up in menopause. It will come up in menopause for you to deal with, and this is why you can have 50-year-olds that go off to uni because a maiden didn't. She might have become a mother, so this is what's the beauty of the cycle. We don't actually miss the phases. We can still honor them no matter where we are in our cycle or where we are in our cycle of life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure the listeners really appreciate that grounding into feminine spirituality and these cyclical wisdom. So I really appreciate that. Um, so why don't we go into your journey then as a woman? So you became a mother in your maidenhood when you were 25. So I mean, let's start there if you want to give us a bit of context before it, or let's dive in to your journey, your beginning of mattress sense in your maidenhood.
Okay, so and I don't know why I remember it, but obviously this is my work. I started my monarch um 13 days after my 14th birthday, 20th of March. Can't work out the year, but um before the year before, horrendous migraines. That was my initiation. Horrendous migraines. Um, which passed once I started. Wasn't really honoured, nothing like that. It just is what it was, you know. Um, about the age of 16, I started working in the Inland Revenue. It was an office job. It was just money. It was great social life, you know, out as a maiden does. And then 25, I became a mum. It wasn't planned. And by this time, I'd already started using my cycle as a contraception. Because the pill didn't agree with me. I was only on it for a few years and it didn't agree with me. And believe it or not, it was my mother that said, you know, be careful around your 13th day, but be careful 3 days before that because sperm can stay inside you. Um, and my mum's not spiritual or connected or anything, but she taught me the first, it wasn't like archetypes or nothing, but it was, you know, when you ovulate and when you bleed. And I started, so at 23, I started using my cycle, no contraception or nothing. So I used my cycle to start um, watching when I didn't want to get pregnant, basically, and when I was on my bleed and that. Not going deep into it at all, but that was the start of it. So at 25, I had my daughter. And looking back, I know I was still in my maiden because I went back to the Inland Revenue. I didn't like it. I just done my maternity, you know, leave payback. Left that, thought I'd become a mother. I lasted 6 months and I was like, no, this is boring. I have to do something. And I'd actually took my daughter to a play group and they were taken on because it was funded by NCH, National Children's Homes, and the social services, which actually then became Sure Start. So they were taken on. They wanted to open more family groups. So I stepped in. And being my personality, I wanted more. So I went back to college and I'd done NVQ3 in early years. So that was the maiden in me still wanted to learn and, you know, take things. And I was doing loads of courses on child protection and just all that kind of stuff. Makaton, you name it, I'd done it. I just wanted it all. I wanted to learn everything. And then in my 30s, I did start to step into motherhood. So I became a guiding leader. I was on the PTA for the school. I was full on motherhood. And I lost myself for a while, literally lost myself. And then I think it was about, 2008. I kind of got woken up. Someone shouted me, and it was my deceased nan. And that was the start of my spirituality in 2008. And from there, I was coming up to we always wanted another child, but just because of the, you know, going to college and then doing the guiding and everything, the years went. And in between that, my daughter had quite a few, not so much health problems, but little things weren't right. So she had a lot of going to hospitals for checkups and everything. And she was diagnosed with dyspraxia and, you know, anxiety and things like that. And so it was coming up to 40 and I was like, right, if we're going to have another one, it's got to be now. So at 37, the month after deciding that, I got pregnant. And this was again using my cycle. And this is why I only had 2 children, because I used my cycle to know when I couldn't be pregnant. And that was right at the end of motherhood. I was changing. I was a completely different mother to my daughter. So my son was born when I was 37. Yeah, completely different. Diets were different. I ended up homeschooling my son. And he only went back in September, his choice, not mine. Um, and it was round about 2012, that auspicious year, that I came across Red Tent. And I was like, at that point, everything in my life had changed. I'd changed, everything had changed, not realizing at the time I was on the start of perimenopause. And yeah, 2012, I found this embroidered womb on Facebook and it just called me. And I followed this trail and found Red Tent. And I was like, what's this? And I read into Red Tent and I was like, oh my God, I need Red Tent. I need to sit in Red Tent. I need to be held by women. This sounds amazing. And there was nothing in my area. So I was like, I'm going to open one. And I don't know where that confidence come. I always say Red Tent was given to me by spirit. It was my purpose because everything just flowed, everything just, and I was like, right, I want to open this Red Tent. Haven't got a clue what to do. And next minute, an online course come for Red Tent. This woman in Australia, Tanishka, I think she's the Moon Woman as well. She done it the first time she put her Red Tent online course online, and I thought, right, I'm doing it. And I done it. And it was more about how you set it up and everything. And I thought you needed this big yurt and everything. And there was just one line in her course that said, and you can start in your living room. And I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I took a whole year. I got initiated by a lovely sister who done like my monarch ceremony. And it was all about devouring everything about wombs and cycles and everything. And then January 2014, I opened my Red Tent. Had 2 women on the first night. The next night was 8, and it went on to do it that I was running it 3 nights because I could only fit 12, 13 women in my living room, and I was doing it 3 nights over the new moon. And I've loved it, and it's been 10 years, and at the moment it's on hold. Because of circumstances that we'll go into in a minute in the next thing. So when it was lockdown, that was the end of my perimenopause going into menopause. And it was great on one hand because I had that pause I needed, but it was not good on the other hand because I didn't have the support I needed from my sisterhood. So now I am, so 49, 24th of March, literally 7 cycles later, was my last period. So on my 50th birthday, I stepped into menopause. And I call myself a teenage crone at the moment because I'm still learning about menopause. It literally not just a step and you step into it. It's a journey. It's another journey to get there. And I feel there's different stages of crone, like your maiden crone, your mother crone, your intensious crone, and then your crone or bone crone, should we call her? Yeah, so I'm in my maiden crone and I'm still learning about what it means to be in this menopause, but I'm doing it with a teenage son who's also transitioning, you know, with all his hormones and everything. And it's really interesting to see us mirroring each other through them transitions.
Wow, so rich. I've got so many questions, so many little snippets there, like just have your journey like whoop, like an accordion, like squashed together. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
This. So beautiful. Yeah, I mean, before we move on to what's happening with your daughter and your own mother, this in more deeper into your own life experience. Let's go a bit deeper into this thread of raising teens in cronehood or whilst you're going through menopause, because it's one thing to be a young mum, have the vitality to be able to study and mother and hold the community, and it's another thing to be having this like internal pull when you want to go in and do the visioning of your life, the reckoning of your life as your womb's starting to, close down and these hormones are starting to shut off. Like, I have no idea what that feels like. I understand when I come into pre-menstruation, how I can be a bit frustrated, less tolerant, but to have, and I've got a toddler, so I have that for a week every cycle where I'm like, don't really want to play, quite happy for him to have a lot of screen time, quite happy to go and cook big meals for myself, and just take us outside a lot and not have to be so engaged like I am when I'm in ovulation. But imagine, like, imagining being like that all the time, and with the hot flushes, not just the sleep deprivation you get with little children, but the sleep deprivation that kicks in when you've got so many hot flushes in the night and you're facing this other, like, everyday, ongoing hormonal fluctuation that happens when your body's, and then you've got this teenager in the background with their own hormone. So take us a bit deeper into that. What are some of the real challenges for you and what you're facing, and also in holding the space for a teen as you're doing your mothering as well, and how does that work in the family dynamic?
Yeah. So menopause to me is like a death of old self. It literally is a death of old self. You don't recognize yourself. You don't know your purpose anymore. You don't know who you are. You look in the mirror and you see an old woman. And this is the transition, and slowly you do come out of that. But it is like a death. It brings up, I call it sacred anger, because it's more anger of the frustration of injustices, that you get so angry about the injustices of women, what's happened to women. And I suppose your own comes in that, you replay what happened to you, things that happened to you in your maiden, things that happened to you in your motherhood. And them injustices, it's not like a personal injustice. It's like a rage for the whole of all women. Um, but it's powerful. And one thing that I noticed with going through menopause, HRT is thrown at us an awful lot. And for me, I'm not knocking anyone who takes HRT. It is a journey. And if you're working and everything, and you need to survive in this patriarchal society that just doesn't give space for women to go through menopause, I understand on HRT. I was lucky that I was home editing my son and I was at home. We created a life that I was at home. So I did, and with lockdown, I did have that space to go through all this burning. And that's what I call hot flushes. We're burning away that no longer we need. So every time I had a hot flush, I'd sit in it. And I was like, what do I need to get rid of? Why is it coming up now? And a lot of it, the hot flushes I found was when I was in anxiety, when I was in anger, and when I was doing too much, because you can't do too much. You haven't got the estrogen like you have when you're a mother to just go through that, I'm tired, oh, I can't do it. But you have that energy to just get through it. You don't in menopause because you've lost your estrogen, and it's your estrogen that helps you. So you have to just release. You have to surrender. You have to go, I can't do it. You have to sit there and rest, because you can't burn out, because you just get sick. So for me, that anger as well, and I think it comes with the journey I've had of doing a lot of search souling, a lot of releasing, a lot of, that every time I see that anger come up and I'd, put it out to my son because his hormones were like, being a teenager, I'm not doing that. Oh, why do we? You know, I'd see that anger, and sometimes I would be like, wow, but then I'd take it back and I'd apologize, or I'd stop myself and be like, no, this is not towards him. This is your anger. And I just keep bringing it back to myself. Why are you angry? Why is this making you angry? Would it go back to something, from my past, that I didn't honor myself as a maiden or a mother? I have found that my mothering is completely different being in menopause. Whereas as a mother, I would be, it's all right, son, I'll do it. It's all right, daughter, I'll do it. And now as a menopause mother, it's like, no, I'm not doing it. I haven't got the energy. It's not my job, blah, blah, blah. You're doing it, you know? So it's very hard to be a mother in this energy, but you become a different mother. That's all. And it's finding that different mothering. So you're just on this huge journey. As soon as you step into menopause, you've got to find, the new mother, you've got to find the new you, you've got to find a new purpose. And I'd say I'm still in that journey at the moment. I haven't found the new me, but I'm getting there. I'm not in the lost period, that sludge, that mud. Um, you've really got to look after your health. Little things. And what I've noticed through perimenopause, these little things will start happening and you don't even realize until boof, it hits you. It could be, oh, I can't eat that food anymore. I don't like it. Or, oh, I can't have as many drinks as I wanted. Oh, I can't, my sleep pattern's gone a bit weird. This is your perimenopause. This is your hormones telling you need to fix things now. Um, this is one thing I teach in Red Tent now for motherhood is give yourself that time. Don't burn out, because your adrenals, everything is in your adrenals to carry you through menopause. And when your adrenals are burnt out, because a lot of us mothers are burnt out, and even by mothers, I mean the mother energy, the caregivers, the community makers, we're given too much, because that's what the patriarch society is. They take advantage of the mother energy, of the giving heart. So we're burnt out. So our adrenals are burnt out. And this is why we're all suffering in menopause. So it's trying to balance your hormones with no estrogen. So it takes a long journey of making sure your health, making sure you rest, making sure you have boundaries, making sure self-care, self-love are all at the top of the list. They are, because you can't, as a menopausal mother, look after anyone else until you put yourself first. And I think that's what's different about mother in mother energy and mother in menopause. You have to put yourself first in menopause. Whereas mother in mother energy, you kind of put your children first. You might put other people first. You might put your community first, your friends. You just give, give, give. It's in us. It's the energy. So that's what's different about the menopausal mother. You put you first, and you have to.
Wow, such incredible wisdom and tools to reflect on. I'm 41. I had my son when I was 38, and
So similar to me with my son. Yeah.
when he was 8 months old, well, we went into lockdown when he was 8 weeks old, but when he was 8 months old, I started a master's, and I was living in this temporary flat that we'd been put in with social housing. And it was, we was in there for 4 months. We spent his first birthday, his first Christmas in that grim, awful, isolated environment. And it's okay, like that was where I became a matricentric feminist, and where all this passion now for motherhood has come from, where my activism come from, the thing I'm going to focus on my PhD, like all of the rest of the work of my life is come from this
Yeah.
baptism of fire. But hearing what you're saying, like I'm realizing like that I am quite boundaried, and because me and his dad split up and we have a good rhythm of childcare. Like I stayed over in Calderdale near his dad. I didn't move back to Lancashire where my family is, where my support network is. So, I made these sacrifices to keep him together. Perhaps also tied into my own father wound
Mhm.
because I didn't grow up with my dad. And I want so much for him and his dad to be well bonded, for him to know that he belongs. And it's also, really beautiful, lush part of the country. And through like you making my own community around myself, we're all right. We're all right. But what was coming up was, yeah, I am boundaried, and I am, putting in these awarenesses into his psyche from a really early age. Like, I'm bleeding in the bathroom, sorting my moon cup out, and he's helping me. He's passing me my moon cup, and like he gets it. I'm trying to tell him, like, around the moon time, you look after mummy. Mummy doesn't really look after you. You be gentle. You don't jump on me. We don't do wrestling when
Mhm.
mummy's bleeding. So I think there's layers of pride in the transmissions I'm giving him, but then, and this balance that we've got where he goes to his dad regularly, I get a lot of space.
Mhm.
Not, it doesn't always fall when I'm menstruating,
Yeah.
but the times when it does, like, I'll have a couple of hours in my bed where I'm doing some really gentle yoga and just deep meditation. Sometimes there's tears, sometimes there's insight, and I'm able to work with my menstrual cycle. But also comes up a lot of grief in hearing what you've said, because I'm an older mum and I'm thinking, oh, these boundaries are just going to get tighter. And, soon, before he's, hitting his teen years, maybe just as he's in him, I'm going to be less and less available because of my cycle. And I think, yeah, I'm just sitting with a bit of sadness about that. Like, because if I were a younger mum, the amount of time he would have had me so available and so present, the difference, maybe, I don't know. So it's just really interesting, like, this wave, what's come now in just listening and feeling that, like, I become a mum in an older phase of my life where I'm probably am perimenopausal. I probably am. And I have a lot of space, and then also just this wave of acceptance, like, this is just how it is for us. This
Yeah.
is our life. This is the card we've been dealt. I'm very blessed to have a child because I did always want one, and he was planned, and even though if it's not gonna last forever, this bond and this playfulness, like, I am an older mom, and it's just been different for us. And then factoring in, what's to come for me and the space I'm going to need as I deepen into menopause, because I was put on birth control when I was 14, and that controlled my cycle, it suppressed it. And then through becoming menstrually conscious, I got rid of this progesterone implant that was in my arm when I was in my early 30s. And it was such a joy to start having regular periods. But again, there's a grief of that, like, all them years, 16, 17 years, all them missed cycles of releasing. So I'm ready for the wave when I'm in menopause, of all the deep purge that's going to come, and I don't have heavy bleeds, but I think when I hit menopause, I probably will bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed because of all that suppressed menstrual activity because of pharmaceutical industry. And my mum thought she was doing me a favour because she had me when she was 18. So she didn't want that for me. So when she
Yeah.
found out I was sexual quite early, first thing she did, just march me down to the clinic, and I just took it as a given, took it as a norm. I didn't even know that you could only get pregnant when you're ovulating. I
Yeah.
thought any day of the month you could get pregnant. So it's just crazy. Yeah, so much in that, like the grief, the, like, oof, having to really get ready for the wave that's going to come when I'm in menopause, having to reconcile that maybe I feel like me and Frankel haven't had enough time. um, but maybe there's a wave that'll come now when I menstruate next, and just getting good with it, remembering the blessings, and just trying to teach him well. Yeah.
About, I mean,
Oh,
if you're coming to the enchantress phase, I felt that was the best phase of a womanhood. I loved that phase. She's wild, she's energetic, she's creative. So, as long, and maybe this is why you're meant to have this, so you can learn. I mean, that's what Circle's about, isn't it? Older women teaching younger women, and, making them aware, because I feel this is all new about, it's not new, but it's a new thing that more women are waking up to the cycles and connecting to the cycles and the cycles of womanhood and celebrating them. And that's what I feel now, coming into an elder, maybe when I'm a crone mother, not a crone maiden, um, about community and teaching the maidens and the mothers, you know, about connecting to the womb and our power, our seat of power, and the rites of passage and being celebrated, and helping them to find how to navigate the burnouts, to not burn out, not to give, you know, because you're not in the mother energy all month, although you're a mother, you know. So this is where I feel, you know, and what you were saying about the grief is huge. Oh, the grief's huge. I mean, I didn't want other children at 30, you know, at 49, but the fact that I couldn't just brought this huge amount of grief. Losing my cycle for me, because I've cycled with it for years, and, you know, all the archetypes, they went. And I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. I can't feel my archetypes because there's no cycle and hormones there. And it's took me a while to re-feel into them, you know, and they are there. They are there. They're just different. They're more energetic than going with the cycle. But that felt like a huge loss, the loss of blood each month that I honoured, the loss of my archetypes that I cycled with. It was just a huge loss, and that was part of the anger and the grief and just all these waves of emotion. You ask any menopausal woman, you just crying one minute and angry the next minute, and then laughing hysterical the next, because just all these emotions, all these things you're going through. But it's kind of like, you know, this is your life book, and you feel it all. You just feel it all. You feel all the things where you weren't honored. Feel all the things where you were angry and never done anything about it, and you kind of have to honor all that, and you have to get through it. And this is where sisterhood comes in, because eventually us sisters got together, and there's there's a few of us that are kind of around the same age, so going through the same things together. And again, like in any circle, you'd be like, oh, I feel like this, so do I. Oh my God, I'm not crazy then. That's normal. That's a menopausal thing. Because they give you menopausal things like hot flushes, but there's so much more, so much more. You know, bipolar, ADHD, anxiety, all linked to menopause. I have so many women that I know that have gone through menopause and have then gone, it's ADHD. I'm ADHD. I'm still looking at that. I don't know if it is ADHD or if it's just you being yourself, you know. And in society, they have to put labels on, don't they, if we're not in these boxes. So I actually think a lot of women getting diagnosed at ADHD, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but I just feel they're actually just being themselves now, because that's what I feel menopause does. It just knocks down all them walls, takes off all them masks, and you literally are like death, naked, raw, in the soil, and then you've got to rise up again. And support from sisterhood is so important, but then any stages, but it's really important going through these transitions. You know, your monarch ceremony, your mother blessing, I think the enchantress should be honored, and then crown ceremony. And a crown ceremony is what helped me, was like the final little thing that helped me accept menopause and aging and closer to death, because that you get all them feelings, you know, things like that.
Wow. So I feel to ask for you to tell us about that. Like I told the story of my monarch at the beginning. So tell us about your croning ceremony for people out there that might also be wanting to do something similar.
Yeah. So it was my 50th birthday. I went away to Bala, right by the lake. We had this little house, and I went with 5 really close sisters that we have circled for years. Some of them were like in my first red tents, and we've just become really strong, really circled together over them years. So they came with me, and what we done is we honored each archetype. So I gave them a little thing, a little script of everything I'd done, like kind of like in my maiden, all the important things I felt were big things, all the important things I'd done as a mother, all the important things as an enchantress. Um, and then each sister, we had like a spiral that I walked, and at each little, there was a little lantern, and there was a ribbons that I crossed. Well, I'd I'd get to a ribbon, and a sister would meet me. So, like at my maiden, she'd tell me everything that I'd accomplished as a maiden, and then I'd light a candle, and then I'd step over the ribbon, and then I'd carry on through this spiral till I got to the mother, and then another sister would meet me and tell me all, that I'd done as a mother and honored me. And I'd light a candle and I'd cross over a ribbon. And it went like that till I, got to kind of the middle. And then they all honored me as I crossed over into the crone. And there I was then laid down, and they just, poured flowers over me and just told me how each I'd influenced each one of them. And it was just, I'm getting shivers thinking about it. It was just lovely because these sisters that I'd give them all their monarch ceremonies. A lot of them have gone on to do their own circles. One sister had never connected to her womb, just thought her womb was pain, and now runs a huge women's festival. So them to acknowledge that, you mean, what you've done, but them to acknowledge it and you hear it back and go, oh my God, yeah, I did do that. I did, it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. I felt honored. I felt held for all my life. Everything I'd achieved was honored and held and celebrated. And it just made that crone, and I felt a crone then. I felt I'd stepped into my crondom and I was ready for the next journey. Instead of like fighting with it and journeying with it and feeling sorrow and all them emotions, I'd stepped into it for being celebrated. And I was like, right, yeah, I'm a crone now and I feel it. And something changed in me again. Like when we are on it, something changed in me. I felt like I was like 20 feet tall. Um, and it was beautiful. And this is why rites of passage for women have to be honored, because when we do change them archetypes, we do change as women, and they should be celebrated because it makes a difference to our journey.
Yeah, I'd like to speak a bit about that actually. I think I walk in two worlds. So I walk a mystical path, deep shamanic initiations, even through my DNA, my bloodlines on both my mother's maternal and paternal side. And the reclaiming of that has been something that's been, again, another many baptisms of fire, shall we say, many dark nights of the soul as I've awakened to these mystical concepts. And then there's also been this other road, these callings to academia. And at first, when I started out on my academic journey, it was like, I need some paper power because the world needs to know that people have souls. And like, I was going to invent this machine with an amazing engineer that could like prove spirituality was real. It was a part of our evolution. And that's what I was going to do. That's how I was going to end up getting a PhD. And I was so young then when I had these ideas. And obviously, my academic journey has unfolded and unfolded and unfolded. And now, with transpersonal psychology being embedded in that, it's like the merging of both are coming back together. So the mystical and the academic are coming back together. But within that, this deep understanding that when we go just on a spiritual path, it's like for me, a bit more. It's less grounded, and we live in a Western world which is very academic, very heady, very much about the mind and logic and ration. And we're only just realizing like there's four types of intelligences. There's rational logic, but there's also emotional and intuitive intelligence as well. And I think when you're in the spiritual world, it's a lot about emotion and intuition. But when it comes to these rites of passage,
what I feel is not just that they're helping you spiritually, they're also helping your psyche
Mm,
to integrate what's actually going on. So
absolutely.
psychologically, if you're not walking that more spiritual, transpersonal, mystical, intuitive, emotional path, you haven't got the framework to help you to integrate what's going on. So you go through these transitions and you end up, some people end up having a crisis, and it can be looked at as a psychic crisis, as in psychological crisis, or it can be looked at as a spiritual crisis or a spiritual emergency. And we haven't got the reference to understand this overwhelming evolutionary change, what's happening to us. And because our collective, our community around us isn't also offering us those frames of reference, then it's like we're really ungrounded in it, there's no anchor in it, we don't really know what's going on. And so that integration, that stepping over the threshold, can take years and years and years to
Mm,
process, to catch up with. Maybe we suffer some pathology because of, again, the culture that we're embedded in, and maybe we frame ourselves as a bit mentally ill or whatever, and really all we need is these both of these worlds to come together. And so when you look at literature on rites of passage and ritual, which comes from the word ritu, it basically is like this gathering of both of those energies that makes it holistic. So that person can have the framework to understand, but also they've also got that transpersonal, more mystical, intuitive, trusting. And then if there's healing that needs to come, like we're talking about grief when our bleed stops, like being able to understand that that emotion is healthy and it's a part of this passage. The death, we grieve it. The rebirth, we celebrate it, we step in. But that transitional, like liminal space in between, there's so much that can happen there if we're held, if we've got that frame of reference, if we've got that circle around us that can help us do that. And some people might look to a therapist or a psychotherapist to help work things out. But I think in the ritual, especially if it's planned around that individual and with their own life, with people that have seen their journey, and family celebrating it, like in the monarch, what, this groundswell of what's happening now with girls' rites of passage as they're going through the first bleed. I mean, it's really helping them, and also changing culture. So I think, these rights, for anyone who's listening that isn't, on the path or doing these kind of more ceremonial circles, if they really are just in this like psychological understanding of humanity, materialist paradigms, pathologizing, overwhelm, when it gets a bit much, like for those kinds of people to step into these rituals isn't some airy furry
mm,
kind of like woo woo spiritual thing. It's actually a very holistic way of meeting yourself, being held, having that psychological understanding of where you're at, marking it yourself, and then you can then with your soul and your body and your mind pass over it fully conscious, and then step right into the rebirth of the new phase of your life, fully prepared, fully understanding, and able to really hold yourself in it. So
yeah.
these rituals are psychological as well as spiritual and very integrative. So I think it's amazing that these things are coming back, and also with the Western psyche that's so delicate and that's so quick to judge and so quick to shun, mysticism. Like I'm loving that transpersonal psychology is here for us to frame it with academic language and to root it in psychology, which is what we need in the West. I think we need to come in through the head and then down into the body and the spirit, and then that makes it more integrated. Whereas in ancient cultures, like I can't remember the name of it now, but in Asia, there's somewhere where they do a monarch that lasts for a week, and
Oh,
this
right.
girl is supported and held and celebrated, and there's a festival and people from the surrounding villages come, and it's this whole full-on ceremony that lasts for an entire week, where she's taught by the elder grandmother. She'll sit with different parts of a family and get given, transmissions, deep understandings, revelations about what it means, what she's holding, and then the way that she can honor herself after that. Just imagine the difference. But she's coming from a long line of unbroken, you know, um, cultural holding of this. And what's happening now in the West is we're getting it. It's getting there slowly, and these things popping up. but we're having to come in from the head instead of through our ancestry, and watching our older sisters, our older cousins do it all. So we expect it. We just haven't got that in our bodies.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It's such a shame, but it is in our bones, it is in our DNA, and it is rooted in the earth and the moon. And so, yeah, really just celebrating that, and wanting to like just leave that as a nugget. Like, this isn't just woo woo, this is deep, integrated, holistic, psychological, and transpersonal, way of helping people develop and
Yeah.
go through these phases of life. So it's healthy, it's necessary, it's important. And as we're showing here, both you and me have had such amazing experiences that have helped us as women flourish by engaging in these things. So
It's
yeah,
saying
even if you pass menopause, like, get your mates and do a crowning ceremony.
you have
Never
to
too
say,
late, is it, to catch
to
yourself
say
up?
goodbye. Yeah, you have to say goodbye to that old you, and you have to step through into the other one. So when I do menarche ceremonies for girls, I get them to say goodbye to their girl by bringing a toy and leaving it before they step over. I give it them back, but it's the, the symbolism of it. Same when I do a mother blessing, I give them a space to tell me what they're scared about of stepping into motherhood. And then I literally physically get them to step. And it's just symbolism. But as you say, in the mind, it's making them new neuron paths, of I'm saying goodbye to that and I'm stepping into it's transitions, it's rites of passage. And they are, I know from myself, and they are so important, really so important.
Oh, beautiful. I'm just checking the time, and I feel like we could just go on and really share more about this. But I want to bring it back. So we've come on to talk about you and your journey as a mother in menopause, right?
Yeah,
Within the framework of feminine spirituality, or just the feminine way. I don't like using that word, feminine spirituality, because these are unique, embodied aspects of what it means to be a woman. This is just women's development,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
feminine spirituality. But it's so enjoyable, it's so incredible to talk like that. But I'm wanting to bring it back. This is your space for your story as a mother. And you shared a little bit about how it was, this interface between your menopause and your teenage son, and his defiance and your anger, and what you're going to do to curtail that. But then you've also got these other aspects with your other child, your daughter, who, I mean, she's going through cancer treatment.
yeah,
And then you've also got your own mother who's been ill
yeah,
and having to tend to her. And obviously, without sounding unsympathetic, both of these things are having an impact on
mhm,
your ability to tend to your menopause and what's going on in your body.
yeah,
So, I mean, let's give some space for that. Let's be tender, because it's difficult. I mean, I can't even imagine, like I said before we came on the recording, I can't even imagine someone telling me them words, that your child's got cancer. I just can't even, I don't even want to go into my body and empathize the feelings of that. So I
yeah,
think it's just incredible, your strength and your endurance to go through that in itself. But then with menopause on top, after I've deepened in my understanding of it over the last hour and 10, 15 minutes, and then also on top of that, holding your own mother, and then homeschooling your son, having your partner in the home, doing these red tents, and like, I just can't even imagine. So I want to give you a bit of space to come back to you, and to have your own space now to share as a woman, as a mother, as a menopausal crone, how these things are all working themselves through, how you're holding yourself, and some of the challenges, some of the gifts that's in there.
yeah. So the one thing is, when you go through menopause, if you read any books, they say it's your second spring, sorry, jumping the season, second spring. And that means they really say that this is a time for you. Your children have grown up, they've gone off. This is time for you to find you, to do the things you wanted to do, travel, blah, blah, blah. Um, And I just find that so old-fashioned, because there are so many women that have children later in life. Um, there's so many women that, did I say children later in life? So, yeah, so many mothers who have children later in life. We have, you might have older children that you become grandmothers, and then you're looking after your grandchildren because childcare is so expensive that a lot of grandparents are stepping in to help their children. You've also got older parents, so you end up becoming carers. And then I was thinking, because like my daughter's also got autism, and I've got a friend who's got a severely disabled adult. So you've got a lot of mothers who are still having to take care of their older children because of their disabilities. And I just felt these books about menopause and second spring just seem a bit outdated. You know, women are having children older. We are surviving childbirth. We are becoming older. And I think we have to rewrite this chapter on menopause. So yes, I stepped through menopause last year on my 50th, so I'm still in my first maiden crone, or teenage crone, I like to call it. And I was home-ed my son, and he decided to go back to school. And now in hindsight, although I didn't want him to, and I'm still not happy, but in hindsight, it was good that he did, because then my dad took ill, was in hospital, he died. And then before his funeral, my mum ended up in hospital, and she was in hospital for 6 weeks. So I wasn't just visiting, I had to take her washing, check in on a house, you know, so you're doing that all at the same time as your own life, as going through menopause. And then December, my daughter got really ill. And as of March, we found out she had the diagnosis of cancer. And so we're in that journey with her, of supporting her and helping her to heal as much as we can. For me, it's kind of like an initiation of Crohn. I find myself, I have got the strength. I realize how strong I am to do all this. I sometimes haven't got the energy, and that's where I have to bring boundaries in. But mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I feel I can hold it all. And is that a menopausal woman, of going through all them archetypes and having that initiation, and coming back to myself from that initiation, of realizing, you know, I feel like I'm a crone now. So I feel like my journey, not that I was prepared for it, but I feel like I have the strength. I have the strength. I feel like being connected to my womb, cycling with my archetypes, knowing myself through the archetypes, being honored through it. I have the capacity to hold it. I do have moments where I will break down. I'm only human, you know, but I feel like I can pick myself up really quick and get on with it. Some people have said, like, oh, you're so brave and all that. And at the end of the day, I'm just a mother. And what else could you do? You can't do it. You know, it's about them boundaries. I've always said, you know, boundaries of, like, if you don't want to do it, then say no. But some things, like your mother being in hospital and your daughter being ill, you can't say no. You can't say no. So you have to have boundaries and other things, and you have to find time for self in other ways, because you're given a lot to other people that you can't really say no to. So that's been part of my journey as well. And I just find it funny that it's my maternal lineage with me mum, me and my daughter, you know. And I've always said, I'd never say this to the doctors, but I've always think it's an ancestral karma thing we're going through.
It's really inspiring, you know, to feel the depth of the medicine that you've got from your path.
Mm.
The life that you've lived early on, tending to your community, tending to the children, in these groups that you ran, and then bringing in these women's circles, like, you've always been a pillar. You've always been what the shamanic people, that they call it the hollow bone, like somebody that's just, or even in Buddhist philosophy, the bodhisattva energy, where there's this strength that comes from a place of grace, because you have a role to play in the community, a matriarchal role, that isn't above everybody else, but that can have this endurance, like this mother's endurance to just keep going, to pick yourself up. And like you say, yeah, you're human, so you're going through these waves of natural, inevitable grief and anger at the state of what's going on with your family members, and losing your dad, but having that spiritual awareness, almost like, again, this word spiritual, it's like something transcendental. It's not. It's like this humanistic awareness of what life is about, and having this bigger perspective through your path and through what you've learned, is giving you this framework, and it's like it's a medicine for you. Like,
Mhm.
you do all this holding, but yet you're held, by this circle of women that have been around you, having that regular space to go and share and offload, and then be energized to go back to your community and your family and do the tending. And then you've also got this belief system which is anchoring you in these moments of overwhelm and turmoil, and helping you to resurrect yourself and come back to it and come back to it. So it's just so inspiring, and a lot of transpersonal psychology literature talks a lot about, how spirituality really is helpful to our well-being, but there's also this rhetoric of, like, the more personal development work you do, the more you can fix it. And what I find with this more feminist wave coming through, we're asking women, and because all the stuff's been written by men,
Mm.
it's quite a young field of study, but all the developmental models have been written by men, and there's really no space other than in women's circles or feminist spirituality that's really showing the full picture of what womanhood is. And so, now is the time where these things are coming in, but you can see just through your journey the deep benefits, the medicine, the scaffold that this belief system can have in your life as a woman. Knowing your cycle, honoring the phases of it, knowing your life cycle, honoring the phases of it, having these rites of passage, making sure you're tending to the woman's needs, which isn't about more and more personal development work. It's about leaning into community. It's about being held. It's about receiving that medicine that women bring naturally, just in the sexuality of our biology. We hold our eggs inside our wombs from the moment our sexual organs have developed, while we're a fetus in our mother's womb. So she's already got us in her womb when she's inside our grandmother. So we're there in this living library of the female body. And that's what I think the female body is, this living library that never drops the ancient lineages, the ancient patterns. It just never drops it. And everything your grandmother experiences is imprinted in you,
Mm.
and inside your mum's womb while your grandma's pregnant with your mother, and the same and same and same and same. So there's just this constant holding. That's what the feminine does. It holds. It's got permeable boundaries. Like, even when the egg has been fertilized, it doesn't just hang out stuck to the lining of the womb. It buries itself
Yeah.
within, and then the womb lining closes around it. So we actually do become one
Yeah.
with our children. We don't just hold them in our womb, we let them into our body. Likewise, when we're in heterosexual relationships and we're in the act of lovemaking, we allow ourselves to be penetrated, by the sacred lingam. We absorb his sperm. That sperm then gets broken down, that's not used, and moves through our DNA. So we feel the ripples of all of his ancestral trauma, all of his stuff, all of his karma that's in his DNA. So we're constantly holding and processing things from our environment, and so this idea of us needing that too as women
Mhm.
is so fundamental. I think that's like the core for me for women's spirituality, or women's development, or feminist spirituality, whatever you want to call it, women's circles. It's that we're being held.
Yeah.
because we do so much fucking holding, pardon
Yes.
my French.
Yes.
You know, we're
Yes.
being held. And so I'm
Yeah.
just seeing, I'm so inspired by, you know, this thread in your life. It's like you've cultivated it. You've done so much holding, you've cultivated the holding, and now that's paying off. It's paying
Absolutely.
off. Being held by the wisdom, you're being held by these ideas that nurture you to be more authentic, in alignment with what a woman's needs are. And even under the weight of the grief of your dad, your mum being ill, your daughter having cancer, your son being a teenager and having the menopause and all the rest of the stuff you're holding together, you're staying strong in it. You're coming back to yourself in it because you are resting in the holding of all
Yeah.
of these things you've cultivated. So it's
Yeah.
really incredible and really inspiring. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I think as well, and this is part of what I love to teach. Not teach. I don't like the word teach. I'm not teaching. Reawakening women. This is what I like to reawaken, how powerful our wombs are. You know, when we sit in our womb and we ground to the earth, how much we can hold when we believe in ourselves, when we connect to our cycle. And when we connect to our cycle, we flow in life much easier because we're not fighting against it. You know, when we're in the maiden, we do the work. When we're in the mother, we do the loving. When we're in the crone, we do the resting. You know, and as long, and I know it's hard in society, but you've got to find ways. You've got to find ways to honor them, you know, in your cycle, in menopause, because if we want to change the world from a patriarch society, then women have to account for themselves, to take account, to connect with the cycle any way they can, because we're not going to change otherwise. If you're letting patriarch rule us all the time, you know, I have to work then and I can't do this. You find ways, you know, if you're bleeding and you've got to do a full day work, when you're in your maiden, do some batch cooking. So when you come home, throw a fresh, lovely meal in and then go to bed early, have a lovely bath, go to bed early, you know, do your party in the week after when you've got the energy. It's about saying, no, I can't do that. Sorry, I haven't got the energy this week. In fact, no excuses, just go, no, I'm not, no, you know, it's just no. And that's that. I don't need to give an excuse. And then it's doing things that bring you joy. And that's what's got me through this as well, finding them things that bring me joy. So sitting in circle. I love to drum. I love to do creative journaling. You know, I love to dance, even if it's just in the kitchen at the moment. You know, it's finding them things that bring you joy in that chaos. So that's about self-love and self-care, isn't it? So, you know, they're really important. Don't forget about you, no matter where you are, no matter what you do, and no matter what you've got to give to other people. Don't forget about you. You know that your cup's half full. You've got to fill your cup first. It's true. It's absolutely true. And be boundaried. You know, my boundaries, I can't say no to my daughter and my mum, but I can say, come home from hospital and say no to texting everyone when they ask how's Holly, and do it tomorrow when I've got more energy. That's where I have to have boundaries. So it's finding things like that, not just pushing yourself all the time. As women, we have hearts and wombs that just want to give and nurture. And it's just remembering that we can't. We've got to give and nurture to ourselves first. And if we do it to ourselves first, then we can give it to everyone else without burning out, without becoming sick, without becoming emotional, without becoming angry. And sitting in sisterhood, so important. And I don't mean just going to a festival or a retreat or this circle this week and that circle. I mean, find a circle and you go every month that you can and you circle with them women, because it's circling with the same women every month, and they see your joys and they see your failures and they see the chaos and they see the luck, and they support you and they nurture you and they celebrate you each month. You know, that's what a true sisterhood circle is, circling with the same women every month.
Wow, such good tips there. Such amazing, wisdom and that permission. I'm sure so many women have just gone, ah, and you said, in fact, no excuses. Just say no. Because there is this deep conditioning growing up in a patriarchal society. Like we are taught from a very early age that we're the subservient sex and that we're the ones that have to you know, make ourselves more appeasable, make ourselves more available, like almost like self-sacrifice is good. That's what we're taught from a very early age. And so it's really difficult to notice your blind spots when it comes to patriarchal conditioning. But I think those little things where you're not apologizing, it's not that you're being unapologetic, but that you're just not apologizing for being yourself. If you can
Mm,
start there, like where do I go into people pleasing because of patriarchal conditioning? Where do I go into self sacrifice because I think I need to be the good girl? And to start there with the boundary where you just say no. And at first, you might go into a bit of an explanation because it might be very difficult for you
mm,
to change, but then start to drop the explanation and just honoring yourself in that no. Like it's not a fight to society, it's not something that's making you aggressive or a bad girl. It's actually a word that you're using to honor yourself
mhm,
and to break the chains of patriarchy in this epoch now where it is all about women's liberation, women's rights, and us coming in to balance the collective. Like what you said before, like if we don't step into that, it just won't change. I had a really interesting conversation with a male friend, a very authentic conversation about these topics. And I said to him, just tell me really honestly, like, how does it really feel for you to go inside yourself and to let go of patriarchy and what it gives you as a man? How easy is it? And he was really honest and like he's a lovely guy, sensitive soul, wants nothing more than the balancing of the collective. But he did say, wow, if I really am honest with myself, it's really hard. It's
mm,
really hard to let go of that power, to let go of the conditionings that I'm superior. Like, am I going to be inferior? There's a lot of fear, I think, in men in dropping what patriarchy has done for them, but actually, when they come into the heart and they reckon with themselves and their integrity and their virtue, they acknowledge the fact that they're on a living planet, a sentient planet that needs this so much right now, and they honor the collective of our humanity and the next generations, like what is best for all of them and all of us is to let go of this
yeah.
domination, this hierarchical structures, not just over women's bodies, but over the land, over the earth, and over the creatures on the earth as well. And so I think it's a big process. So if we can come at it where we're just holding ourselves, honoring ourselves, not fighting against patriarchy, but just rising into the truth of what we are, not claiming it back from anywhere, like because patriarchy is everyone's fault. It's been an emergence in humanity, I think a shadow epoch that we've needed to go through, but it's over now.
Yeah.
When you look for archaeological evidence that spans back like 6 times longer than patriarchy. There was no war, there was relative peace, and I'm not saying there was no conflict, but there's not much evidence of the terror and the evil on the earth that's been in the last 3,500 years. So we've had pre-patriarchal epoch. So Sharon Maloney, who's an amazing feminist academic, she actually calls it the lost weekend of patriarchy because pre-patriarchy was like the week before
Yeah.
the lost weekend of patriarchy. So now we're on this like Monday morning phase where we're all waking up out of this weird dream. And yeah, in the dream, it was good for men and it was shit for women. But now it's like, okay, now we're awake. Now we're conscious. Let's put everything back. Let's tidy everything up, but put it in a better structure and a better order so that everything's all right for the next children that come through and see it all. Let's make it harmonious for them. So it is like the work is for women and it's for men, but we have to hold each other in it, and be authentic and kind. And I think if it all comes from the heart, the work that you do with yourself and then the work that you put out there into the world, if it comes from the heart and this deep truth, then it can't go wrong. It just can't go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's just quickly this little story that I always remember. Now I don't know names or anything, but this um reporter went to like the Amazon, met, a tribe and all that. And the shaman came back to America. And when he came like off the plane, he just turned around to the reporter and was like, "Where's the women? Where's the women?" And the reporter was like, "What do you mean?" And he just went, "Well, in my tribe, it's the women that tell us to stop because men just will chop all the trees down, but the women say stop when we've got enough wood. And it's the men will just kill all the animals for food, and it's the women that go, stop, we've got enough." And I just love that story because that's what I feel women need to do, step up and say stop, and we're not doing that because of centuries of, persecution of women, with the witch trials, with the hysteria, with the, being put away for hysteria, for the Victorians, where, you women had to be quiet and needed a man to do anything. Women have been suppressed for so long that it's kind of in our genes to just be quiet. And what this shaman was saying is, no, women need to speak up and say no and stop, and I think that's what I always try and do with Red Tent, is just to empower women, empower them, realize the power they hold, not in a I'm better than you, but just empower enough to hold the masculine, because that's what they want. They want us to hold them in a, you know, um, I'm connected to the earth and you're connected to the universe. So
Yeah, so beautiful that you say that and bringing it back to motherhood. Like Franco, I think it might have been last year. I think it was about 3.5. And I remember him saying, "I want to go back into your womb."
oh
And I mean, sometimes you probably felt it, like we all have, when we're in desperate times where we're running out of emotional resources and everything's going a bit grey and we're just questioning why, like reaching up. Some people, it's like they're reaching up for God or source or something, but I feel like it's we're reaching up for the mother to hold us, and wanting to just melt back into the safety where everything was okay, our needs were met, and we were merged in this beautiful, like, primordial state of consciousness, just where everything was relatively peaceful. So
mm,
I get that. I get the men wanting to be held. And I did a retreat day once. It was yeah, Conscious Connections retreat day, and we worked through the chakra system with different practices that were relative to each theme in the chakras.
mhm,
And by the end, there was this practice where the men could ask the women to tend to them, almost stepping into the tantric arena. And the women could ask the men. And what I saw with every single person, some were couples, some weren't, some were strangers. But overarching, all that it was the men wanted to be held and the women wanted to be viewed as empowered and not wounded.
yeah,
And
sounds like
that's what I
yeah,
got from it. It was so beautiful.
yeah,
That the men, they just want to be held.
yeah,
So it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And coming back to motherhood, like I think any woman can go on a journey with a menstrual cycle and find this sisterhood and journey. But what I found from my research, my dissertation, was that women who have been on a spiritual path in these sisterhood containers, then when they become mothers, it's like they need a different level of shared experience where they can relate, where they can lean in. And I found that as well. And the other thing is, when you are with a child in early infancy, it's difficult to find that time to get away from your child. And so, and some women's circles are welcoming of children, but if they're doing quite deep work, it's hard for women to process big emotions when there are children there, because we want to censor ourselves, because we're sensitive to the emotional vulnerability of
yeah.
these children. We don't want them to see us all in blind rage or grief where we're wailing and howling, arriving on the floor, like it's probably a bit much for a 2-year-old or an 18-month-year-old. So I think for me, like, the next phase of my work is trying to cultivate these environments where the women can come and do the women's work in a container where they're held as mothers as well, and
Yeah.
where the children are welcome. And I developed that last year, the village it was called, and it was like a shamanic mum and toddler group. So we did have a lot of restorative yoga, deep meditation. There was a share circle, but we made sure we had snacks at that point, and there was messy play all around, so the kids could be quite engaged. And when one woman was deep in her share, the other women had been nurturing her child so that she could just flow in process. And then after the women's work was done, then we'd bring a story, might have some shamanic themes for women, but it would also be elaborated to be child sensitive, and there'd be sound effects, and and then we'd do creativity together, which marked the seasons. And I think that was really pioneering, because like, you said earlier, you've got Sure Start. Whenever I went to those, they never introduced the mums, and it was never a safe space
Yeah.
to really talk about how it is for you as a mother. It very child-centered.
Yeah.
These groups are very child-centered.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work to be done around opening spaces for mothers who are spiritual but not religious to be able to tune into all of this whilst they've got the children in the space, so they can journey, especially in early infancy. So
Yeah.
that's something that's next for me. And
And
I'll
that's what
mention
it's
it
for
as well,
me.
like
Yeah.
I want to do, so I'm going to do a regular like mother and toddler nurture space, which
Yeah.
will be like the village, perhaps a bit less creativity and not as long. But then I'm also going to do these regular mattress sense mending retreat days, where we come together without our children for 5 hours, and journey with some deeper healing practices. And it's all centered around this mending pot that I'm making from clay, which has been foraged from near bodies of water, which have held me through motherhood, which is one of them's my mother river, and another's a river from behind my mother's house. It's infused with this maternal magic. And interestingly, like the first day I went collecting, I was on my own, so I could be deep in ceremony and have that spaciousness. But the second day I went collecting, I was with Frankel, and at one point he had a tantrum. So there's even the challenge of motherhood
Yeah.
that's gone
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
mending
Yeah.
pot,
Yeah.
and so this will focus some of the rituals that we do in that space. So yeah, if there's any listeners out there that are needing that, just get in touch. It's going to be very, very special, and I'm going to hold them once every few months, and we'll start at 11 and finish at 5 on a Sunday, which is an easier time to get childcare, so we can be there to do the morning stuff and get home to do tea and bedtime. Just honouring that how we have to squeeze it in
I know.
these
I know.
confined spaces. Yeah.
Well, that was my next step. So with Red Tent, it's always about the women having time for themselves, to come away from motherhood, to come away from the jobs, the carers, whatever. And at the beginning, I did allow babes in arms, but I always found the babes never settled. I don't know if mum was uptight or scared it was gonna. And because it was in my home, I never had anywhere for mum to go. So I kind of had to stop that. But there was a part of me that knew the mums needed it, new mums needed this space. So now, but I was a mum myself, so giving more energy was very hard. So what I was going to do in September, and I was speaking to another sister who'd just become a mum, and we were going to start running a mum's red tent, in the daytime to come with the babes or the toddlers or the whatever. And I was like, and then, from that, they can eventually come into red tent. And then I was like, and then I want to do a crone tent as well. And then I can go back to doing a young girl tent. So I feel like now that's where I need to be in community, setting up these groups for the individual groups that need it. But then it all, because of me dad, my mum, and then my daughter. But it's on hold. That will happen. That's what I feel, because mums do need that support as well. Absolutely, and if they have to do it with the child, then it's better than not having nothing. And that's what our family groups used to do. Although we were funded by Sure Start, it was called a family group. So it was more about the parents, coming together and being supported. And then I was the play leader that entertained the children. So, it's like everything you do, you think, why am I in this job? you realize at the end, you learn all these skills that help you further on. You know, you don't realize, like me doing Girl Guiding with the activities and all that, that comes into Red Tent. You know, I do a lot of creativity because that's the feminine, and they just all come, you know, my whole life, you know, when I'd done the Cronin ceremony and you've seen everything and you was like, right now I know why I done that. Why, now I know why I done that, because it all leads back to now and here. Yeah.
Oh wow, what a journey. What a journey you've had, and how lucky,
Yeah.
how lucky is our culture at this time to have people like you and I who are visioning these things in that are so
Yeah.
desperately needed,
Yeah.
so desperately needed. So, I mean, if you're up for it, I could perhaps put your details on the podcast information. And then if people are ready and wanting in the, is it Wirral area?
I'm in Widnes, so I'm just on
Widnes.
the border of Liverpool. Yeah.
So around that area, if people are wanting to get in spaces like this,
Yeah.
they can contact you and get on your list for
Yeah.
autumn.
Yes. Or and ceremonies, you know, any ceremonies they want honoured with. Yeah, can do that as well for them.
Beautiful, such beautiful work. So I feel like we're coming to a really natural conclusion,
Hmm.
and I'm just wanting to offer you the space. If there's anything else alive for you that you want to share in this space, or any more tips, anything else you want to speak to that you didn't get to in our beautiful meandering, anything else you want to say to bring some closure to your journey today.
Um, I mean, I think we covered most things, didn't we? Um, I think all I want to say is anyone that's listening is, you know, to honour yourself, especially mothers out there. Don't burn out. Just don't get to burn out. You know, honour yourself, give yourself that space wherever you can. Whether it is batch cooking meals when you're in the maiden energy and you've got that energy to do it. Um, and speak to your family, absolutely, you know, your partners, your children, let them understand that this is your time. Um, so your adrenals are not burnt out when you walk through menopause. You know, you need them adrenals working, not frazzled. And that helps you go through menopause. You know, you don't have to, you can go through all the emotional side without trying to sort your health and physical side. Because when you lose that estrogen, oh my God, you don't realize how important estrogen, you just take it for granted, but how important that estrogen is in a lot of our functions as a woman is unbelievable, you know. And maybe people should start learning how our hormones work, you know, how not just the archetypes I'm speaking about, but literally, you know, the biology of it, and then realize how your body actually works and how important your hormones are, and look after yourself, you know, not look after other people as carers, as mothers, but yourself. Really look after yourself. You're worth it. You know, you are, all women are worth it. The self-care and the self-love, I feel, is should be top of the list and not bottom.
Oh, so simple in the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah.
Do your restorative yoga around your moon time, have your baths, have your ready-made healthy meals cooked by you with love, and do that holding, and yeah, just enjoy that deep rest, and reflecting on how incredible you are, and what you've achieved, what you've overcome, the strength that you've had to endure, because we've all been through so much, haven't we? And we all are going through so much right now in this time on the planet, with such violence, such ecological disasters, the ecosystem crumbling around us. And it's a real, we're on a knife's edge. I feel we're on a knife's
Yeah.
edge, and so to not get into the fear of that, to embrace, yeah, this is the reality, but then to keep coming back, holding yourself, leaning into the holding yourself, leaning into the holding. Oh
Being a
wow.
mother, Be the mother for yourself. Be your own mother. I mean, that's mother wound, isn't it? But that's what you've got to be. You're an adult now. You don't need that, mother thing. You just need the mother within to hold you.
Mm. And giving yourself permission, like what we've said, not just to speak up to culture
Yeah.
for your own sake, but also with your families.
Yes.
If you're new to menstrual consciousness and you're thinking about introducing these concepts to your children, what I found is just to be real about it, not to try and dress it up, not to try to deliver it in any way. Just I've always let him be around it and see it, and speak to him my truth about it, to let him see my frustration and to let him know that's what happens in women's bodies. This is what we all hold, so that we can have these menstrual cycles, so that we can birth children onto this earth. Like without that, we wouldn't have a next human race, a next generation. Without that, we wouldn't have it. So we honor it. We honor the toll on women, and that's okay to call that in from your
Yeah,
family, from your children. That's okay to call that
absolutely.
in, and like what we
And
mentioned
especially
earlier.
the daughters,
Mm,
and sons are important because they might have wives or they might have sisters or friends even, But as your daughters, you need to start from an early age and you need to be the example of power, the power of the womb.
yeah, beautiful. I've got a daughter, so I don't have that frame of reference. So everything for
Yeah.
me is about raising this empathetic, pro-feminist
Yeah.
young man. So
But
thanks for
even,
bringing that
you
in.
will deal with young girls in your environment as well, so,
Yeah.
it's important, isn't it? You might have nieces, you might have cousins, that have children, girls, it's just getting, because one thing that upsets me is my son in school is saying that the girls are the worst for fighting, and I'm like, because I'm in this bubble of sisterhood, and I'm thinking, oh, the world's changing, and it's not. It's not. It is when you're in that bubble of sisterhood and you've got it, and that. But out there's a lot more women that are not in sisterhood and are still not connected to the womb and are more in the masculine of fighting and competition. So I feel like my work's only just started. I'm stepping into that elder, and I don't think there is many elders in community. There's the odd one, but we're the generation who've done the work that need to step up now to help our younger generation. And I feel that's where my work will be going. I'll leave it
So
on that.
amazing. Good for them kids. Good for us. It's been such a rich, inspiring, educating episode, this, Jane. I'm so grateful. I feel like I've got so much from this, and it's going to take me a while to digest, and then I get to listen to it all again really slowly as I go through and edit it. And so yeah, I'm so grateful for everything this has brought for me, and so grateful for your honesty. You've been through so much, and your life, and just wanting to bless you as a woman that carries all of this, really praying that you are held, and that you can have the resources that you need, with your own family, to nurture yourself, and then beyond that, this wider work, this wider calling to serve our humanity, and just really honoring you, for stepping in to serve, because it takes a lot, and often it's not big financial payoffs either. It's the real work of humanity. Like, you're the real heroine of our time, that's just, doing it for the sake of doing it, because it needs doing. So I'm really inspired, and just so grateful for you, for your work, for this time today. And yeah, just really praying deeply for you and your resources. May you be abundant in your work. May you carry on having this energy to serve, and praying for healing for your mum, and praying for healing for your beautiful daughter Holly. May she come through this with vibrant health, and live a long and happy and healthful life, as she gets to have her own children, and you get to be that beautiful grandmother, and yeah, just really praying for your lineage, that this can be it in the feminine lineage of suffering now, and just all of you step into that realm of peace and harmony and abundance and joy.
Thank you, Beau. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate being seen as well. Thank you. Thank you.
So welcome. So that's it, listeners. What an epic episode. Giving thanks to you've listened, and just reiterating that point. Like, if you've been inspired by anything you've heard, if you want to know more, if you want to get in touch with Jane or myself about the work we're doing in our communities, I'm in Yorkshire, Northwest Way, Jane's in kind of Widnes, Cheshire, Merseyside way. So we're here in the Northwest, offering these amazing containers for you to step in, be held, learn about these concepts. And, if we're too far, have a look for your closest red tent. There are so many out there. Have a look for your closest women's circle. And it doesn't matter where you're at, just step into that community of sisterhood that's there waiting to embrace you.
And if there isn't one, set one up.
Yeah, that's true. Go for it. Call it in, or create what you need around yourself. So thank you so much for listening. I've been Rainbow, and this has been Jane, and we've been Rawful But True. Could you?